One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. We are continuing our content coaching series today on the podcast, and next up is Kay'aleya. This was such a fun conversation. I really loved the perspective of having someone who's really at the beginning stages of starting to create content online. So some of the previous coaching calls that we've done have been with people who have a little bit more experience in the space, and they're like, I think I want to pivot. I think I want to change things up. But today's coaching call with Kay'aleya, I feel like she is very much in the very beginning stages, and that might be exactly where you are. Or if you're listening to this and you're further along, we bring up some of the topics that maybe you forgot about. Maybe you forgot that you even made these decisions, either consciously or subconsciously. And I hope that you kind of reevaluate, were those the right decisions? Or do you need to go back to the drawing board and think about some of these different topics within your content that you should come back to? Some of the very foundational principles that you may have set 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 5 years ago, and take a closer look at those. But enjoy today's coaching call with Kay'aleya. Let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? All right, Profit Podcast listeners, I'm so excited for today's coaching call because we have Kay'aleya on the show, and this is going to be so much fun. So welcome to the show.
Yay, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes. Well, I want to just dive right in. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and what type of content that you're creating?
Okay, so I am a clinical herbalist and an integrative health educator, and I work mainly with women, but anyone with wombs, gender non-specific, helping them support their menstrual, sexual, hormonal, and reproductive health with herbs and natural therapies. Yeah, that's what I do. Oh, and content
Awesome.
creation. Okay, well, I just started a podcast. Like, I'm literally just launching myself online. I'm so new. I don't feel overwhelmed because I feel like I've been taking the steps. Like, I did your course and I've listened to your podcast a lot. And honestly, I've used you as a major mentor for me. And so I don't feel overwhelmed, but I do feel like I'm in like a sea of the beginning, and I don't really feel clear on how I'm going to move forward, and actually be consistent, So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm creating
First of
the
all,
podcast. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say you're normal. All the things that you're feeling right now, it's 100% normal. So I just want to validate that for a second, that you're not alone in feeling that. I think that it's a normal part of the process of putting yourself out there. But I want to hear more about like what specifically you're working on. Are you, have you already put your podcast out there and launched it, or you're in the process of doing that right now?
So I officially launched last week, which is huge for me. I mean, it's been like a vision for a long time, and so to actually do it feels complete. It feels kind of unreal still. But yeah, I launched it. I shared it on social media. I've gotten, some good feedback. And yeah, I launched 4 episodes, and then I just got another episode out yesterday. So I'm trying to do the weekly, episodes. That's where I'm at with it. Yeah. And I think,
Awesome.
what feels
Awesome.
really,
Well,
oh, go ahead. Sorry, I can't.
no. Go ahead. We are here for you. No, you are
Okay.
perfectly fine. Go ahead.
I think what I really feel confused about, I mean, part of it is that I'm probably just new, right? So it just takes time to get into the flow of things. I assume that over time, I'm going to feel like everything is not so hard and I'm not like walking up a mountain constantly. But what I'm experiencing now is like working on those 4 episodes and then getting this past one out. I feel like it's taken 80% of my time, of my work time in the last couple of weeks, or a few weeks, honestly, just to do that. And so I'd love some support around how to manage it. I think part of it also is that I know so much. I have so much to share. I have so much to share. And it's so hard for me when I'm sharing, like if I'm like on the podcast and then I go off on a tangent. And I mean, I can edit those parts out, but then it takes time to edit those parts out. So it's like, wow, I'm like a waterfall. So I'm trying to figure out how to like
Yes.
tame myself.
Well, this is great. I think that this is a fantastic problem to have, if you even want to call it a problem. It's more of a how can I like kind of compartmentalize all of the ideas in a way that feels like it's actually flowing out of you in a productive way. Because I think that a lot of people, especially people in this audience that I have noticed, like there's no shortage of ideas. Like people will tell me, I have hundreds of things to talk about. I just don't know which one. Like, do I start with the best one? Do I start with this one, like the one that people need, or the one that they're asking for? There's a lot of different ways, and there's no right or wrong answer here. So when the overwhelm or the rush of all of the ideas kind of hits you, I would sit down and I mean, my secret to being consistent is planning. It really is like sitting down and saying, okay, I really want to talk about this one topic. What can I cover? And then if I look at an outline or a script and I say, oh my gosh, this is going to be a 5-hour long episode. If I were to cover all of these things, then I can kind of break it off into pieces and say, you know what? I really just need to talk about this one piece of it. And then the rest of this can go in another podcast episode. Or maybe you kind of see a vision of, oh, this could actually be a series. I could create 3 specific episodes about this one topic. So there's no right or wrong answer here. I think that usually I tell people to start with what excites them the most. And since you just launched, it's likely that you probably put out like an origin story of why you're excited about your podcast or you're in the space that you're in. But to continue to keep going, I always tell people to look back at, well, what did you put out and how did people respond to it? So if you have one episode that has more downloads, and if you have an audience and you could say, what did y'all like about this? Or, can I get some feedback? But no pressure to do that as well when you're first getting started, because that's going to come with time. You'll have more data, more numbers as you keep podcasting, and you'll be able to see which things are really resonating with your audience. Does that help?
Totally. And I think what you said probably that's most helpful is just the idea of being able to break down. And it's something that I'm just learning through doing it, right? Like I had to have the experience of creating these like massive episodes that I had to edit out, like, 25% of, just to make them into like a reasonable length. But just understanding that about myself, because I've never done this before, right? So it's like, it is new. And so, yeah, the idea that I could actually make this into like, it could be 2 episodes. It doesn't have to be one, I like that idea a lot. And I have a teensy tiny online audience. I mean, really, most of my work has been one-on-one, and I have not been trying to get myself online yet. So I'm really very much new to it. I do have a lot of friends who I think have listened to my episodes. I'm not sure who were the listeners. There is one episode that was listened to the most, but I also think that was like the one that was on top last week when I launched. So it was like, the 4th episode that was just on top. So I think that might be why it was listened to the most. However, I think it's going to take time. I think I'm going to have to build an audience, and it feels like so much. I know that you were here at some point. I know that you're like now so developed. So at least you understand the experience of having like nobody and like not sure who I'm even talking to.
Oh, yes. No, you're saying like that top one was probably listened to the most. And I just imagine that I remember when I first launched and I got like, 10 downloads on one episode. And I was like, oh, I bet 6 of those were me. And then the other 4 were probably my mom listening to it and saying, yes, it's good. Like, no, you sound fine. Like, I mean, this happens for everybody. And I think that I love that you have the right mindset about it. It's just going to take that time of, now you've gotten your feet wet, like you've launched. And I think that is a huge congratulations worthy moment in and of itself, because most people won't even get that far. So I hope that you celebrate it and you're excited about it, but just also know that launch is so much more work than the repetition and the consistency. Like that, imagine if you are like adopting a new like workout, like you're going to start running, that first mile you ever do from having not run at all, like you're going to die. You're going to feel like I'm dying. This is not working for me. But then the next time you go out and you're like, okay, I know how I need to control my breathing, or I need to have better running shoes, or I need to not go when it's hot. Like you'll have all these kind of tools in your toolkit to where now you've ripped off that Band-Aid of putting your content out there, how it works. And so now it's just that, how can I make showing up consistently easier? That's really the struggle that podcasters face after they launch, is how can I continue to show up consistent? And I have it, here right now, like one of your top goals for 2022 is to actually be consistent. So do you see anything kind of popping up over the next, let's say 6 months? Do you see something where you're already foreshadowing like it's going to be a challenge to be consistent?
Well, I think that there's part of who I am that where I often tend to be really excited and good at something at first, and then I can fall off of it. So I see that reality as a pattern in me that I want to overcome. So that is one thing. Secondly, I feel like I can craft my weeks and I can really like be serious about this. But, the fact that I'm working on my own, and I do have like a couple accountability folks that I work with, but the reality that I'm like a solo entrepreneur makes it hard, like I think that's definitely a piece of, I'm the only person who I'm sort of being held accountable to realistically, like it can be. I think that's my main thing. I don't have any like specific things coming up. Yeah, there's some people who are coming to visit, or I might be going places, but I imagine that I can kind of like batch things. It's just, Yeah, I think the reality of consistency itself feels scary to me. To like committing to that feels scary. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So my advice, because I've bumped up against this. I can't even tell you how many times whenever it comes to doing a podcast, doing YouTube, emailing my list, like there's all these different facets that you do realize that are important to having an online business or being present online, but you have to decide for yourself, like what's the most important. And I think especially, as you find yourself kind of going down the different rabbit holes of ways that, I mean, because I could tell you we could sit here for hours and talk about ways that you can market your podcast and talk about your business and grow all these things. But if you're like, Crystal, I have no interest in doing any of that, then that is priority. And so I would just kind of write down, and I don't know if you're a journaler, I'm a journaler. And so I like to write down and think about, well, what do I want to be doing 12 months from now? And for me, I love the content creation. I love the podcast. I love doing videos. I love emailing my list, not so much for the actual writing of emails and like putting them out there, but the responses that I get back from my audience. Like that's truly what I value, and that connection and to have that validation. I mean, let's be honest. I'll throw my ego out right now at the mercy of this episode. Like I love that validation that I'm on the right track and that I'm creating something that is of value to someone else. And that's what keeps me going when I have a sick kid at home or something happens and I have to go out of town or this and that. Like I will say, okay, well, what is my priority? Posting on social media for me isn't a priority. It's kind of a nice thing. I like to make it happen, but putting the podcast out is the priority for me and my business. So that would be my recommendation, is just to say, what do I want to make sure that happens no matter what? And how can I just kind of lay out a plan to see that that happens on a consistent basis? And consistent is like, let's put it in quotes for a second, because consistent for some people may look like putting out an episode every other week, right? Or every, like twice a week. That could be consistent for somebody else. So you just have to decide what that label is for your own self, but also don't overcommit to that because things could always change in the future. So it's such a fluid, weird space to be in. But I just love the idea of creating a plan and a strategy that works best for you and your audience.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Yeah, and I'm still like in the process of even cultivating an audience. So it'll be interesting to see what comes. I feel like it's very much, I'm very much in that discovery place. So thank you for all of this. This is helpful. I think one other question I have is just, how do you batch? Like, so what I did last week attempting to batch, and I don't think I did it very well because I feel like I failed miserably, honestly. I was like, attempting to record multiple episodes in a day, but then I ended up editing them like at the same time. And then I ended up trying to write descriptions. How is it helpful for you to do those things separately? Or have you found a way to like integrate them? What do you do? Or suggest?
Yeah. So I have a book recommendation for you. Yes. I will tell you what I do and I will tell you what. So my suggestion is there's a book called The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. And it really helps you kind of compartmentalize the different tasks that you do whenever you're doing anything, not just working, but, like doing stuff around the house or, working outside in the garden. Like there's just, the concept is you really get in the flow of one thing and you focus on that very intentionally. So the way that I do this is I will sit down and I will plan. So I batch my planning and I'll plan out 4 or 5 episodes at one time, or 4 or 5 emails, or it doesn't matter what necessarily the planning is, but I just get in that headspace of I'm going to set a timer for an hour and just plan. And that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to record. I'm not going to get a shiny object and say, oh, let me go look this up. Like, nope, just plan. And then I set aside time that's specifically dedicated to just recording, not editing, and I will just let, one trick that I wish I would have adopted sooner whenever I started recording my podcast was whenever I mess up, I don't stop the recording. I just stop talking and I let the audio file just run. And then I know some friends of mine that will clap, and that kind of indicates like, hey, this is where I messed up. So it's easier to find those in the edits. But for me, I just stop talking instead of pausing for a second and then saying, oh, well, really, I was talking about this. Oh, wait, no, because that's a lot harder to find in the editing process. But if I just stop talking and I'm looking at the audio file later, I can see like, oh, there's a big 3-second break right here. So I can go grab that and edit it a lot faster. So that's for so it's planning, recording, and then editing. I don't do a ton of batch editing at once. I will do batch plan, batch record, and then I'll edit kind of as the content is needed, because that's what works for my schedule. So that's what I would recommend, is kind of trying to compartmentalize, giving yourself like that strict boundary of I'm just recording. I'm not going to edit. I'm not going to try to do show notes. I'm just going to record, because it'll make it easier when you do go to upload all the finished product. You can say, oh, I can write all these show notes at one time, or I can, edit these all at one time. And you just have that flow. It's a lot easier than task switching between the different things that you're doing. Does that help?
That is, yeah, I really appreciate the tip about the making the space in the editing, because that has been so, and I know I'm really new. This is only my second week doing it, but, just that has been so hard for me edit wise. It's like, it takes forever to find the places that I have to pull out. And, one of the things I was doing was like, because of that, I was just, stopping the recording and then restarting the recording. And that it just takes a long time to even do that. It's like the stopping and starting and the thinking about it rather than just doing it. Yeah. So thank you for that. And I'll check out that book. The One Thing sounds good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great one. It's one that I haven't read it this year. Here we are, we're in 2022 and I haven't read it. It's one that I've read once a year, I think, since it probably came out in 2018, 2019. And it's one of those, it's not very big. I was like, it's like right over here. I can't grab it right now, but it's one of those books. It's not very big, but it's been very impactful for me to just have that intentional time to focus on the one thing that's going to be the priority or the most important that I need to focus on. So definitely check that one out.
Awesome. I have another question. We still have time, right? So I have another question.
Go for it.
Or do we have time? I'm sorry. We're like continuing to go. Just about show notes, because I feel like I don't really understand what to put in show notes. Like, am I trying to create like a mini blog in show notes, or am I just trying to get somebody to listen to the podcast? Like, what is the goal?
Yeah. So I see on here you currently have a website. Is your podcast going to be an extension of your website or a page on there? Like, tell me a little bit more about your website.
Yeah, a page on the website. Okay. So my website itself has, my clinical work, and eventually I'm going to have courses, but I don't have that yet, and then the podcast is one part of it. Yeah.
Okay. So I had a conversation with another coaching client earlier today, and we were talking about the same thing. And she was saying that she has it as like one page has all like the Buzzsprout player, and it has all of the episodes. And she was saying, well, what's any different than me just having all the episodes on one page? And I was like, well, nothing. You could completely have it like that forever and ever. And it's just your resource for people to find the podcast. And hopefully they would go listen to it on their phone or in their car, like their device somewhere, and they would be interested in your podcast. But what the show notes do is it goes above and beyond in the fact that, yes, it is like a blog post that also feeds we called it the Google monster, because it's like, it gives it that SEO juice for having like, oh, here's, you talk about the herbal, I'm trying to think, did you say it was like herbal medicines, or is it herbal like applications? Like the different ways that people would be looking for the content that you're talking about. And it gives people really like, well, what are people looking for? Like maybe it's medicinal healings for pregnant women or women that want to become pregnant, or, different options that aren't medical related. Like I don't have to go to an MD and get prescriptions, like all these different things that you could possibly talk about in your content. That is the reason why you would have a podcast, is so those people that are looking on Google, they would be searching and your content would populate in the search results. And it's really hard to make that happen unless you have this extended blog post that has all that information on there. But for you, and I'm giving you like, this is specifically for you and where you are in your journey right now, I would recommend just focusing on being consistent with your content right now. And then maybe by episode 10, maybe even episode 20, you can look back and say, okay, now we can start thinking about doing the blog post and doing all that. But for now, if consistency is the big thing, I wouldn't try to stack more tasks on top of what you're already doing. I would get really comfortable with recording and editing and just putting your show out on a regular basis. And then maybe in a few months, come back to the idea of adding the blog post to your content. Does that awesome. Sound like, I see you nodding a lot. You're like, yeah.
So helpful. I love that advice. I love the advice, but it's something that I can work towards, Yeah.
Yes. And I think that that's what happens a lot. I have a lot of people that come to me and they're like, I love podcasting, but I hate my show notes. And I say, well, then don't do them. And they're like, no, but you said. I'm like, no, I know what I said. And it's what I do works for me because I've been doing this for a long time and it doesn't take me as long. I'm not trying to figure all of it out. I know how to do it. And so I would much rather see you be consistent with your show and then add on the fancy things later, because at the end of the day, the podcast, just putting that out there is the priority. And yes, having all the blog posts and all the show notes, that's amazing to have those things. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a recorded audio file, it's not edited, like you can't put that out. And like, that's the way that I look at content.
Totally. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Crystal. I'm really appreciating all of this.
Yes, this was awesome. Well, tell us where everybody can find you and connect with you and learn more about your podcast.
Yeah, well, my podcast is Herbal Womb Wisdom. So you can just look that up on any of the podcast apps. And then I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I'm just starting out, but I'm happy to receive anybody who's interested. I would love to connect with folks who are interested. So just Herbal Womb Wisdom on either Facebook or Instagram. And then if you want to check out my website, herbalwomb.com is where you can learn about anything that I'm offering.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today and asking all of your awesome questions.
You're so welcome.
Like I said in the beginning, this episode today was really going to be for people that are in the earlier stages of their content creation, but it also made me think about just those big decisions you have to make in the beginning. Maybe it takes some people longer to make them. Maybe you're like, man, I made that decision in 2 seconds flat. It just depends. Everybody is so different. And this is what I'm loving about these coaching calls, is we are seeing the different perspectives from all types of creators. And I hope that you are enjoying all the different perspectives, the different points of views, and the different ways that people go about creating their content and making these important decisions. So make sure you go check out what Kay'aleya is up to. Go to the show notes, go to crystalprofit.com/episode 353 to connect with her and go follow what she is doing. But that's all I have for you today. So as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.